You can turn your camera off if you don't want your image to be recorded. And if you don't want to be recorded in the chat, please don't use it. Oh. All right. So tonight we are going to be hearing from Andrew Zarbo. I did say that last name correctly, I hope.
You did.
Cool. He's going to talk to us briefly about life before UX and how to establish and grow UX in an organization. Pretty much his story about bringing it to a company, how it went, how it evolved, and all the nitty-gritty and fun stuff that entails. He is a senior UX and a UX or UI designer, but we'll get into a little bit more about him in a second. So I have to go. See, I told you it's been a while. So the slides. Little bit about our chapter. If you are new here, you can invite anyone you want to. They are open to interested individuals. You do not have to be directly within the industry. Any creative or anyone who's interested is welcome. And brought to you by, and I'm now going to think about Sesame Street for most of the evening. Storm Dog Design has sponsored us for this series of webinars. So very much thankful to Stephen for those good wishes to keep these going. So if you would like to get further involved, it's very easy to do so. Just send the group a email, or you can message one of the members on Slack. We're more than happy to have people volunteer and help out. Or if you just have questions or concerns, you can also email us. All right, what's coming up? As I kind of alluded to, so we're in September, but this is actually August meeting. So I guess there's some time warp happening, but hey,
that was my fault. Sorry.
We'll forgive you this time. But for the end of September, I will be presenting on fonts and Font Matters, the unsung hero of UX design, sometimes often forgotten, overlooked, but it's pretty darn important. So that's what's coming up for you. Ah. And then in October, we got Pradeep is presenting Zooming Out, Dyslexic Designer and the Power of Contextual Thinking. This one is near and dear to my heart because I have those tendencies. And it's very interesting sometimes to deal with it, or design for those that are. So those are the 2 September and October upcoming presentations. So back to our focus tonight. Andrew. So as I said, he is a senior UX designer and front end. Well, you got a better title on this slide than I have in your bio. So
that's okay.
In front end development, he works at FedPoint, which is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I have a little bit of knowledge with Andrew because I interviewed for a job at the same company for a little while. I went elsewhere, but it's been an interesting time, and it was great getting to know him at that point. So I am going to allow him to take over sharing and bring to you his presentation. Feel free to put questions into the chat, or if you are being brave and would like to speak up, feel free to. If not, sit back and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, she said, feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm probably not going to be able to see the chat, but she will monitor and interrupt. That's totally fine. Obviously, at the end as well, we'll do some Q&A. Yeah, whenever something comes up, by all means, please bring it up. Okay, let me make sure this starts sharing. All right.
Okay. We can see it.
Good. Good.
Yep, you are good.
All right. Yeah, like she said, this this whole talk is about really it's kind of about my history as a UX designer and how I got into the design field. At the same time, working in a company where there was no design department, or there was really nothing design related at all established in the company, and how me and my other teammates helped to actually establish that. So just a quick little kind of overview of what we'll be talking about. It's in the beginning, it's exactly that, kind of how I started. how I started developing my skills, and how I started to find the need for design thinking to be introduced into kind of the work we were doing, my design path, how that started forming, and then kind of where the turning point was along the road. That design really started to step up, and we started to introduce things here and there that started to have a big impact, and kind of shift how we were perceived in the company as kind of a naive, a young design department, um, but how that really shifted, and then kind of seeing that tide shift as those things started to roll and progress. You could really see a big change in the company, and then just kind of ended on kind of the current state of affairs where we're at now. Um, and yeah, so before we get into all that, obligatory kind of about me. I've been with FedPoint for close to 18 years now, which is in our industry like unheard of. I talk to people about that all the time, and it's kind of crazy that I've been there for almost that long. But I've developed my career there, and I've been definitely mostly design oriented for probably roughly 15 of those years. Um, but I do love it. I'm glad I fell into this field. It's definitely what I love to do. I'm a creative person. I'll get to my wife and my dog in a second, but I'm a creative person by nature. So like I'm also a musician. So this field really fell into my lap and was like just the right thing for me. Um, that's my wife, Catherine. Funnily enough, she also works at FedPoint. We did not meet there. We were together before that, but she works with me at the company as well, which is great. We love it, and it's super helpful. And that's our dog, Walter. He is a 122-pound Bernese Mountain Dog, 2.5 years old. He is the definition of a doofus. If you look it up in the dictionary, his picture would be right there next to it. But he's a huge love, and he's our big boy. We're also, pretty big foodies. We love to cook. We love going out to restaurants and have good food. We're avid golfers. Anytime it's not snowing, we're trying to either play golf, or we love the beach. We go to the beach. We go to the mountains. In the winter, I snowboard. My wife skis. Actually, her entire family skis. So that's how we make it through the craziness of winter. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Kind of the good stuff, the highlights about me. So again, just kind of, quick overview. This field of user experience, as kind of we all know, those who are in the throes of it, it's still fairly new. It's only really maybe 10, 15 years old as far as the term UX has been coined, but it is growing exponentially. But for some of us, that are certainly old enough, we remember a time when like it just didn't exist. Design was kind of limited to visual design. Being a web designer was just throw some colors and some images up there, throw some text on a page, and that was kind of all it was limited to. But over the last number of years, this discipline has really grown and exploded, and certainly for the better, as I'm sure we all can see. So this talk kind of just highlights the early years of my career, how I stumbled into this, and then how all that led to helping establish a UX department within our organization. So in the beginning, when I started, I was extremely green. This was literally my first full-time job out of college. I started on the phones as a temp, working on one of these products that we have now. That it was the first year it was ever established. So I just came on as a temp, didn't really know what I was doing. But very quickly, I was able to pivot away from that. And because I'd taken one course in college, it was an HTML course. So I had very limited, kind of rudimentary knowledge of how to build a web page and stuff like that. So I had that, on my resume. And so when they needed some people after that kind of initial period to help just make web content updates and stuff like that to the site, they pulled me, thankfully. And that's kind of how I got into that. And in the beginning, it was just, again, it was just basic, really basic web content updates. It was, our main client was just feeding us, Word files and stuff like that to just say like, hey, update this on the site, update that on the site. So it was me and one other person, and we were in charge of that. And that's really all we were meant to do. The original platform that we were using, if people remember, it was actually built using tables, which I'm sure that makes many of you shudder. It was kind of a nightmare, but that's how it just was. And it's a platform. It was this really complex form that was crammed into, a not really. It was crammed onto 4 pages, and it really just wasn't. It wasn't usable. It wasn't. It didn't make sense. And really, the reason for that was because in the beginning of this product and kind of the company was that development and BAs were the ones that were leading that design effort. There was no thought of design of what it actually is. Again, they were just kind of thinking like, just put stuff on a page, make sure the form works. We just have to do this thing and crank it out to be able to stand it up and have users come in and use the product. So that's kind of where everything always started. It was, BAs and dev would talk about things, and they would say, oh, we need to make this change. Let's do this. Let's put this here. Let's use this UI element to kind of collect this information. And they would just, produce these long requirements documents. And so I was kind of brought into help with that a little bit and look at it. And I used to write a lot of requirements as well. I did a lot of stuff, testing, requirements writing, ran the gamut of stuff. But I was brought in to help write some of those requirements and work with dev on this stuff. And, as I started to get into that and started to become more familiar with it, I ended up kind of being the one to say like, oh, the way you have this written and the way you're trying to collect this information doesn't really make sense. Like it doesn't, something like you're saying we should use like radio buttons to collect this when really we should be using a drop-down menu and things of that nature. So it was me kind of getting into it and getting familiar with it, but then also kind of questioning, why would we do it that way? Like, I don't really know, that doesn't really seem to make sense. But that's just kind of how it went for a while. They would write the requirements, they would, produce the development and get into testing and stuff like that. And then it would just kind of go out like that. There was no design consideration really whatsoever. So for the first few years, that's kind of how it was. But as I kind of started going along, I realized that I just kind of had a little bit better of a sensibility of that stuff than, the BAs or dev really did. So I kind of went off and started doing stuff on my own, just reading articles, just scouring the internet, just like looking stuff up, just more out of curiosity. Not that I knew what I was looking for, but it was just like really curious, like I've seen this done someplace else on like other websites, like, let me take a look at that. Let me see how they handle it and kind of get those ideas. So I was kind of starting to form that path. And, at the same time, like the term UX, I can't exactly remember when it was coined, maybe the early 2000s or mid 2000s. But it was very new and very young, and I didn't really know that was happening, kind of on the peripheral. But I was still just, trying to build, trying to go that path and figure out like, I know design can be better than this. Like there's got to be a better way to do this. So I tried to start, inserting my ideas a little bit. I had ideas about how to make things better. And I would suggest, those things. And I would actually sometimes go back and rewrite requirements to try and get those things in. And obviously, it was met with a lot of resistance. Development, as we know, once they start developing something, if you come back with a change and say, no, we're not going to use a drop-down menu, there's there's only two options here. Let's use radio buttons instead. That really throws a wrench into things. So it kind of got under people's skin for sure. But I knew that it was the right thing to do, and I wanted to keep kind of going that route. Definitely, along with that resistance, my manager at the time was not really design focused either. They had a very different kind of skill set and were analytical and things like that. So I unfortunately didn't get a terrible amount of support in that end, but I still kind of pressed along, and I still kind of tried to build my UI skill set. I was trying to solidify a foundation of at least UI standards, even just from a visual like UI perspective. I was trying to get better at that. Just learning about the heuristics of things, best practices, when and where to use buttons versus links versus, like I said, all those other UI elements. Kind of understanding the usability and things like that. And so at the same time, I was taking a course. Actually, took a bunch of training courses with HFI, and just really delved into that, and I ended up getting my usability analyst certification. So I think that was a big help. That gave me the tools and foundation to really, come back at it and say like, okay, if we're gonna design this flow, if we're gonna do this thing, like I'm gonna come in at the head of this and say, here's how we should do it. And that started to pick up steam a little bit. Like even in the days when we really weren't totally design focused yet, like I started to make those suggestions, and people could kind of see it and kind of understand it a little bit. And when they finally came around with dev and we would get it back for testing, people would say like, oh yeah, like okay, yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. That's kind of how that makes sense. So that kind of helped get the ball rolling. But really, it was a change in management within our department. So our department was really kind of focused on, again, like I actually forget the name of what our department was at the time, but it was more focused on just like simple design stuff. We were also doing like some web analytics and surveys and things like that. So a lot of it was kind of rudimentary, but my previous manager had moved on. And so we hired a new manager who actually came with quite a few years of experience in what, at that point we now knew as UX. But they came in and they were the ones that kind of looked at it and said like, oh, no, like this is what this company needs. This is what this department needs to be. They understood the power of like what design could do, and they did it in the physical space. They did it in the digital space. So they had a really good wealth of knowledge, and they came in and just really like provided new kinds of support for us, and kind of carved those avenues for us to start making design a priority. They empowered us, to make decisions, to go even further, just to kind of like play with things, play with ideas. That was kind of something we'd never really done. We just kind of stuck to the rule book, as it were, in terms of what we were designing and writing requirements for. So, they came in and they said, like, let's start doing things. Like, let's just start sketching things out. Like, let's get together and whiteboard some ideas. Let's do those things that, we all certainly know now is like, those are the golden nuggets. That's where, you find those golden moments of where the design needs to go. And so they really helped to push design to have a bigger seat at the table within the company. It was definitely slow going. Again, there was a lot of resistance just based on the way other groups had formed processes and work habits. It's really hard to break those habits once people get into that routine after, a number of years. At this point, when they came in, it was almost nine or 10 years when I had been there. So changing that mindset, shifting that was definitely a bit of a struggle, but again, they really helped. They really kept pushing it. They kept, making sure their voice was heard. And yeah, they really helped and empowered us to keep going. So that's what we did. And really where the things started to turn around was when we started to introduce actual designs and wireframes as part of the software development lifecycle. And where we ended up starting was we brought on Axure, and we just started doing basic wireframing for some very small projects. We didn't try and take on like a huge big thing, but we said, you know what, we've got this little project over here. Why don't we try this tool out? Bring it in. I got myself familiar with it and was able to learn it pretty quick, and just start use this basic wireframing. Show them how the page should look, how things should lay out, like being able to effectively show them how things need to be ordered and like the logical order of things, and basically really just them being able to see it was really like that aha moment for people. That I remember it so well, that it was just, as soon as we did that, the first time we did that, you could see people's faces going, whoa, like, okay, now I see what you mean. Um, this manager actually in particular, I always think about it that, a lot of people say that, oh, I need to see something. I need to see a visual of something because I'm a visual person. And he always loved to actually counter that and argue against that. And say like, oh, if you're a visual person, you shouldn't need to see a design. Like you should be able to envision it in your head. So he always kind of touted that, and it kind of makes sense because for however long we were doing that, writing requirements first and just doing that without any sort of like visual idea of what was happening. Um, when people could see it first, it was just that like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like, okay, yes, this makes sense. It's a lot easier for people to visualize that and see it from the get-go than to read a 6-page document of requirements and try and visualize what that's going to be. So that really helped us, and we started to utilize that more and more. Again, little things here and there. We didn't we didn't try and boil the ocean, as it were. Um, but we took that, we started incorporating it. Those early wireframes didn't actually really have a lot of full design elements on it. It wasn't a lot of colors. It was just, boxes, arrows, shapes, things like that. And just laying out the forms on the page just so people could get the idea of it. And so, yeah, that's how others realized that these, what I was presenting and why I would change requirements previously, um, they got and they understood that okay, those made sense. Like the decisions you're making based on design now are making more sense. So we started to be able to incorporate those wires much earlier during phases of requirements writing. We shortened the process a lot, kind of focusing on those first with Dev and BA. Obviously made it a partnership. We didn't want to do it in a silo. Having them involved, kind of seeing it, getting their input, letting them have a chance to, come up with design ideas and things like that, was really helpful. It was super, super helpful. It got other people involved, and made them feel like part of the process. And it's just really started to help and grow. And it's, like I said, started to shorten requirements writing. And it also allowed us as a group to kind of defend our designs based on more research and industry best practices. When I first started making design recommendations and saying like, no, we should change this or we should change this, really it was kind of just based on my opinion. And I feel like a lot of people felt that way, and they just saw it as, oh, he's just, where's he kind of coming from? He's kind of coming out of left field here and saying we should change these things, but there's nothing really backing it. So at this point, now that I had, developed my skill set some more, I had that usability analyst certification, and I at least had that background, that helped bring some authority to it. And doing this, introducing this along with it, really just allowed us to, come at it as like, nope, we should do it this way. We should align things like this. We should use this component instead of this, because this is industry best practice. Like, this is not just me saying this. This is what the rest of the industry does. This is what like users are used to seeing. Um, so it gave us a lot of good ammo into, to bringing those to life, and kind of like making that shift a little bit. So, yeah, the tide after that, like the tide really started to shift into how our process worked. We were, as designed as a group, we were definitely brought into the SDLC a lot earlier in the process, and we were starting to gain trust. Um, Dev started relying on the designs before requirements were even started, even being written as a source of truth. I remember one time we were in a meeting, and one of our dev leads, somebody asked them, I think they said like, do you need designs first, or are you good to start with the requirements? And they immediately said, oh no, we're gonna wait for the designs. We're gonna wait for Andrew to finish with those, and then we'll use those to start coding. So when I heard that, first time I heard that, I was like, all right, we're making some progress here. And soon that started to become the norm. We were getting tapped to do designs ahead of time, and then have, review those with the group, make sure that BAs were good with that. They could write to the designs, that dev could do the same. They could build it. Again, it was good partnership. It was strengthening that partnership, because people could see it and they could ask questions. They could kind of poke holes in things. And, there were certainly a lot of times when somebody would make a good point and I would say, you know what, actually that's a good idea. Like, I think we should do that. So let me take that design back, and we'll kind of go in that direction. And that was really when the impact of design was starting to have an influence. It was tangible. It was really tangible. Like, you could tell it was shifting a lot. There was even a good example of that was in one of our platforms. We have this kind of eligibility piece of what we do, and the way we used to do it was this really long form. It was asking multiple questions in multiple different formats, and it was just, there was so much information getting thrown at users that it was really confusing. It was really hard to make sense of. And if you miss something on one end, if you miss a question at the top somewhere, which was really easy to do, and you try and move on to the next page and you get errored out, it was a mess. So that one in particular was, we were able to take that back and just say, like, you know what, like, give us a little time to think about this. Let's kind of get in a room and whiteboard some ideas. And what we came out with was a really drastic change in how we presented all that information. We moved from this one big page form into the thought of, okay, well, what if we just ask people like simple yes, no questions? We kind of know where we need to get to in the end. But there's all of these questions that determine where you're going to go along the path. So we just said, why not just ask some simple yes, no questions? Are you this? Yes, no. If yes, okay, you move over here. If no, you move over here. And that was another thing when we implemented that. It was a huge shift, and I think it really helped. According to some of the early data that we had, it really helped users. It was much more focused. They could kind of make sense of what we were asking them along the way. And I think that whole thing, that again was like a huge win for us, and really kind of allowed people to say, like, okay, like what they're doing, like the way they're kind of approaching things from that design lens, really is making a difference in kind of big ways. Around that same time, we moved from waterfall. We were waterfall for years, and then we finally embraced the agile methodology, which was great. Getting those 2-3 week sprint cycles, working on things constantly at a time. We weren't trying to do this whole big thing all at once. That was super helpful for us across the board. But I will say one of the pitfalls that kind of ended up coming out of introducing wireframing and designs first was that, well, one, we were still boxed into that specific SDLC, meaning, you know, we had 2 weeks to do the sprint, and we were now tapped at the very beginning to say, like, okay, we have these items, like, come up with designs in 3 days, because the sprint is only 2 weeks long, and we have to do design, we have to do requirements, we have to build it, and we have to test it. So, it was a great win that we were starting to gain more respect and get design in front of everything. But all of a sudden we were boxed into this really, kind of tight limited time frame. And it started to wear on us. It was tough because we didn't feel like we could really do our work properly. And we didn't have the time to really kind of sit down and think about it, just throw stuff at the wall, come up with ideas that we say, nah, this isn't any good, this isn't good. We had to have stuff like super quick because everybody else is asking, like, hey, nothing else is happening until you give us designs. So, can you give us the designs yesterday? And that was tough. That ended up being kind of tough to deal with. And, we dealt with that for a while. So that was definitely one of the pitfalls. And again, kind of the other thing was that because now dev and requirements and the BAs are there, it's all waiting on us to have designs finished and ready to go and approved before they can start doing stuff. That was that much more pressure on us. We're the front lines of this. Like, you got to get this done. You got to get this done tomorrow. And so kind of a lot of our work suffered, I would say. Like, we were kind of forced to just say, like, all right, what's the easiest thing we can do in the time allotted? Let's just do this thing. Even though we knew, like, the ideal solution is over here. It's sitting over here. We know what it looks like, but we can't do it because we don't have the time. So that was kind of a big detriment. And I think that's because, we introduced the designs first as part of, the full UX process that most of us, I assume, know kind of what that looks like. Design kind of falls in the middle, but that's where we started. And so that's kind of how we got boxed into those kinds of things. But even aside from, the shortcomings, we really started to see real measurable results of our efforts. Again, like that eligibility piece, that redesign, like, we started to see an increase in, or like a shortening of, duration and time that people were spending on the site. It made it easier for people to get through it and accomplish their tasks. So, we were starting to see actual results of what our work was doing. And again, because of this, other departments started to understand why design and UX is important and why it matters and what we actually bring to the table. We were being taken more seriously and looked at as the experts and leaders. We, in the early days, it was just, we weren't really included on a lot of decision making or, meetings about different initiatives or projects. We were just kind of brought in as an afterthought, and, like, oh, we've got this thing, like, come in and make it pretty, just change some things around, add a new button on here, but now, because of this, we were starting to be taken more seriously. We were included at the beginning of, big projects, and people were turning to us to say, what do you guys think? Like, what does this look like from your perspective? Like, how much time might we need for stuff like this? So that was really good, in terms of kind of really bringing us into a true UX cycle and process. That really helped. And again, others were eager to participate in those design sessions. They really liked doing it. People that don't really, have experience in seeing designs and kind of messing around with stuff, at least in my experience, working in something like Acture or eventually, Adobe XD or Figma, when other people that don't get to use fun tools and stuff like that, when they see it and you can kind of bring it up in a session and work on stuff and like people really take to that. They really enjoy it. They're like, oh wow, this is fun. Like, look at this. Like, so people really bought into it. They understood that the real value that we were adding, bringing to the company, this design first kind of thinking, design, avenue, like they got it. They were starting to get it, and it trickled up. Senior leadership really started to buy into it. The mindsets started to shift, and it helped us. That really helped us to, then kind of like break out and say like, okay, like as a UX team and the way we see design and how it needs to work, here's what else we need to do. So it wasn't just design; it started to kind of be, all the other facets. Like we started not really incorporating research, but we started to talk about it more. And then we were really starting to take data analytics much more seriously, um, and kind of use that to influence things, and kind of how we were, designing based on that. And so that's kind of where we are now. I would say just in the last couple of years, we had another manager come in who, again, came from a UX background and really saw kind of where we were, and saw that, could see where we were bringing good ideas, and where we were valuable, and all the good things we were doing, but definitely saw like kind of how we were stuck. We were kind of like stuck in that rut, like I said, of the development life cycle, and we just we weren't getting enough time and dedication to kind of doing the things that we needed to do. And so they came in, and within a very short amount of time really kind of exploded the doors for us, and took the reins. And one of the biggest things they did was they were able to pull us out of that development life cycle and put us in front of it, which a lot of us within our department kind of knew that that's how it needed to be, but we just didn't really know how to execute it and get there. So this person came in, and they were able to do it, and we were able to establish our own kind of design sprints, and we were starting to be able to be the ones to dictate, okay, what items are we going to work on, what are we gonna focus on here, like we can pull this thing over here. And it made a huge difference for our department, because we now had more time to kind of work on stuff. We weren't limited to the things that development and BAs were throwing at us, saying to work on this thing. We could kind of go through the backlog and say like, okay, like this ticket here, we can pull this in. I can work on this. This person over here can work on this. And it really just gave us so much more freedom and space to do our work appropriately, effectively. So that was a huge win for us. Also, kind of at the same time, we're really pulling in data more. We're establishing a real strong data analytics program, and we start using that to again help influence our designs even more. Bringing it to the business to say like, hey, we have this design for this. This is why we're doing this. It's based on this data. It's not just people's opinions. That was a huge detriment for all those years too. It was, it's design of opinion, and there was no testing involved. There was nothing. So it was just, oh, this person over here says they want to do this because they think it's the right way to do it, and you have to do it. So that mindset, started to shift. It was like, nope, we're not just designing this because this is what we think looks pretty, or because this is just what we want to do. We're doing this because we have data to back it up. There's research out there that supports this. There are other web standards out there that we're pulling from. We're not just making it up and trying to reinvent the wheel. And so that has helped, kind of propel us even more, so that people see like, okay, like they're pulling in all these things. This is how design is actually helping the business, and to help move it forward. With any of our, kind of steady state stuff or new projects, people can see now just how much it helps guide that company vision, and kind of where we sit today. We're in a good spot. There's a large level of respect for our group and what we do, even though it's very small. Um, there's only a few of us on the team, but everybody is a rock star, and we get it done. And people see that. People notice the level of effort that we put into what we do, and we're in a really good spot. But at the same time, in terms of a mature kind of UX program within a company, which I'm sure I don't know if any company really has like a full true like dedicated UX process or program, but it's always the goal to shoot for. So there's still a lot more that we want to do there. Incorporation of research is something we've really taken more seriously within the last, I would say, just year or two. Some of you are probably cringing because you know how important research is. And again, we do too. And we always try to push it, even if it was just some little level of research that we could leverage. We tried, but we're now starting to really dive into it more. And again, that's another thing. We've done some research projects over the last few months, and we've presented it, to higher ups in the company, and they see it. They see where the value is, and they see what it can do for us. So, we're still kind of plugging along. We're still trying to fight battles here and there of certain things. Working like resource overload or work overload, too many projects for the amount of resources we have, and things like that. Everybody deals with that, but we're still trying to build it. We're still trying to build out, that data piece, that research piece, trying to do that, make sure we really get more iterative and all that good stuff. So, we're still in flux. We're still trying to get there, but, from my experience and talking to other people in the industry and, knowing kind of where they are, like it took us a long time to get where we are, but it's good. It's really good that we are where we are. And we're, it's really only kind of onward and upward from here, at least from my point of view. So yeah, that's kind of it. That's kind of my story and how we were able to establish a UX department within our company that had no UX design or design at all, really. It's not necessarily the right way to do it, but it was the way we found it. We stumbled upon it and we made it work. So I will leave it up to the group, and if anybody has questions, please have at it.
So thank you so much, Andrew. That was great. There's a couple people that have dropped off. I wanted to ask you, what was the most rewarding part of doing this for you? The thing that, like, in 15 years or so, that you will remember and look fondly back upon? And you can stop sharing your screen so that people can.
Yeah. That is, let's see, hold on. Where's the screen share? There we go. Good question. I mean, the most rewarding part I would say is just seeing, like I said, seeing that shift in the way we operate, especially in the development space, because it was just so backwards, and a lot of people that we worked with, kind of knew it, and I think a lot of people had just difficulty trying to initiate change in that regard. So I feel like this was the thing that when we again started introducing actual visual designs and wireframes and things like that, that was kind of the thing that really helped other people realize, like, oh, there's a different way to do this, and this is kind of a better way to do it. This is how we should be doing it. And so it's only taken off from there. Like I can only imagine if we still operated that way, that we wouldn't be nearly successful today if we still operated like that. It was completely unsustainable and just wasn't going to work. So the amount of change that we have been able to initiate in that regard and completely flip the development cycle and things like that, and we got quicker, we got better, we got more modular and things like that. So that really helped kind of lead that shift, and that was a big shift for our company, for sure.
Is there anybody else who wants to jump in? Otherwise, I can keep peppering him with a couple questions that I head while it is. Um, going once, going twice. My turn. Ooh, Nathan came up. Go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to ask in this transition, which I think probably sounds a bit familiar to a few of us. I'm curious, the transition to doing more research.
Mhm.
I've kind of found that that doesn't have the same light bulb moment as sharing the wireframes and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've got any advice or anything that you've learned through the process that really helps sell the value of the research end of things and makes that real to stakeholders in the same way as seeing those
Yeah.
UI.
So from our perspective in my my own personal perspective, like it's definitely tougher. And like I said, like we really have only been delving into more research stuff just fairly recently. And I'm sure we all know like it's research was always one of those. We would propose it. We'd propose going out and say like, hey, let's we have this pool of users we can tap for this. Like we should do this. Like let's just put it out there. Let's try and get some stuff. And it just constantly got shot down. Others in the company, project management, development, whatever, whoever it may be, was always like, that's just we just don't have time to do that. Like that's we can't fit that in. We don't know when we're going to do it. We don't have the funding to do that. So it just always kind of fell off. And I think more recently we've been I don't know if we necessarily like kind of just went off on our own to do it, but we were able to just really kind of do small little nuggets of research like here and there. And I think bringing that with like data was really kind of the turning point there too. Was just saying like, hey, like this data is showing that like these users are doing this and doing this, and we kind of thought it was going this way, but it's actually going this way. So the data and the research kind of go hand in hand, and people kind of started to see like, okay, that makes sense. Like, yeah, like we should do that. Maybe we should switch here. We should kind of shift focus over here. But so far, yeah, I mean, research really doesn't have the same impact as someone just seeing a design. And how many of us have presented a design for something, even if it's just a basic web page or website, and people see the design and they go, oh yes, like yes, that's it. Like I can see that. Like great. It's a little tougher to do with research. So that's still one of those battles we're trying to fight. We're trying to grow that. We're trying to grow our research program more. Some people are getting it, and they're understanding the importance of it. It's really trying to carve out like where do we find the space for that. A good example is there was one project we were working on where we actually said, give us a few weeks to actually interview some users, because it was actually internal users. We were doing a project internally. We said, hey, we have this pool of users that are right downstairs. Like, let's give us a chance to just do some real discovery work. And, everyone else was like, okay, yeah, go for it. So my coworker and I, we led a few different sessions. We recorded it, and it was just, we kind of told these people like, hey, like use this platform. We're just going to watch you do it. We're going to record it. We're going to ask questions along the way, but just show us what you do. Show us how you use it. Like, and talk out loud. Like, talk about things that would be better, or you wish that would change. And we did a few of those sessions, and we were able to synthesize. I hate using that word synthesize, but synthesize the info and put everything on a board. And we had sticky notes and we had design ideas and stuff. And so we actually presented that back to some other senior staff, and that was a moment where actually a lot of people were like, "Oh wow!" Like, not even just for the fact that they saw how much work we put into that, they could see like how valuable it is, like the things we were taking out of that, like different themes that we came and we said, everyone is saying this, like you guys were thinking that this was not a big deal, but everyone is saying like this is an issue. We need to change this. So that for a lot of people was in terms of research, like that was kind of a big aha moment for them. Like if you can pair that with a good visual, right? Like a Fig Jam board, you're throwing stuff up there and you have screenshots and sketches and sticky notes of things, like that can definitely help people realize how important it is and how much work goes into it, frankly. So
thank you.
yeah. My wife is on here, so she's chipping in her 2 cents.
I just pulled I'm on mute, so while speaking, a few people are jumping off and whatnot, so we're going to just wrap on up. You've been a wonderful guest and really great presentation for us. Hope you come around to some of the other ones and maybe present again in a bit of time. So
absolutely.
Great. Again, thank you. If anybody has any questions or concerns, you can email the New Hampshire UXPA@gmail.com if they have any questions, concerns, or go onto the Slack. Cal has been wonderful in posting our link tree, so you can follow us on social, find out when more meetings are coming up and what the presentation topics are. So I am going to stop the recording